It's a solo episode of the Limitless Leadership Lounge. We want to wish everybody here, if you're listening on the day that this is released or the weekend that it's released, a happy Thanksgiving because that, as it's released here, is tomorrow. So I hope you enjoy your long Thanksgiving weekend. But this month, as we know, we're not going to beat around the bush or we're not going to ignore the elephant in the room that this has been a month of division and turmoil in our country. And I know there's also turmoil and division across the world too in many areas. So we're going to talk about a really important concept today, and it's agreeing to disagree. And we often use that term, well, we'll just agree to disagree. But do we really? What does it really mean to agree to disagree? And how can we treat others with respect while we do so? And I can't think of two better people here to bring on to this conversation. I am John Gehring, of course, here at the Limitless Leadership Lounge, joined by Coach Jim Johnson and Dr. Anuma Kareem. And Coach, I'm sure you had a lot of tension throughout your career, a lot of disagreements that you had to work through. So share our first tip here on agreeing to disagree.
Sure. So I think it really comes back to the word that you said, and it is one of my top three core values, and it was also one of our three top core values in our basketball program, and that's the our word, respect. And one of the things that was really important to me is no matter whether I agree, disagree, with in basketball, often the controversy is an official's call, but it could be an unhappy parent with me. It could be an unhappy player that, for whatever reasons. But the one thing that I really, and certainly we just had a very challenging election where some people in the country are really happy and some are really extremely disappointed. So, whichever side you are, but the bottom line is, as I always say, we are called the United States of America, and that key word is united. And if we're going to stay united, that means that we can agree, but we do it with respect. And so I think the one thing that I want to share when I talk to our players about our core value of respect, what does that mean? Yeah, and so I'll give you a couple examples. One is that if I disagreed with a call from official, as I got wiser, I rarely would yell at the officials. I might question them, but I did it in a much more respectful way. Once in a while, I would raise my voice, but because I had treated the officials with respect over my career, especially the second half when I got wiser, is that they would be more apt to listen to me, even when I did raise my voice, because I didn't do it very often. And they knew that I was probably right if I raised my voice because I didn't question very many calls as I got, I believe, smarter. And it's the same thing that I wanted to teach our players. Like an example of respect was no matter how the game went, whether we won a big game or lost a game at the last seconds or whatever it was, we always were going to show our opponent respect by we were going to go and go over and shake their hands, win, loss. It didn't matter. And so that was an example of how we treated respect. And so I think people have to have clarity of if respect is an important word, and of course it is for me because it's one of my top core values, then we have to have clarification of what does that mean. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll then go back to you, John, is that you treat people even when you don't agree with them with respect. And that's by sharing that I don't agree with this. Here's my reasons, but the famous one of the habits that really Dr. Stephen Covey was so wise is that seek first to understand before being understood. And I think that's something that a lot of us are missing right now is if you go on the idea, respect is finding the other person's perspective first, and then you can share your thoughts as well.
That's profound. Renuma, how about you?
Yeah, I have to agree with Coach. Like respect, when you respect somebody, then you will get the your deserving respect. And especially when we are disagreeing on something, when you deal with it with respect, automatically you can de-escalate the tension. also between the two parties. But recently we are observing everywhere, like the heat is up. Everybody, like there are so many disagreement between parties, between family members, office colleagues. And you could see like there is the data, like 76% of the productivity goes down because of the conflict in the office politics and people disagreeing with them. And you could see each other shouting at each other, not disrespecting. So it's so powerful that coach said that you have to deal with respect. And saying that, the way I usually deal with it, because I have been like dealing with many situations for last few days where I did not agree with the other party. But I had to tackle it with respect and also with empathy. Because if I don't, as coach said, that I have to understand the others to really understand the perspective the person is coming from, because all of us are coming from different background, different worldview. So once we get that idea into our head that they might not see things as we are seeing it, then things become a little bit easier. And one thing I deliberately practiced, which was one of the core element from Dr. Miguel Ruiz for agreement, do not take things personally. So once I stopped doing that, like we are just talking, we are discussing. We might disagree, but we do not need to take it personally. So once I have that approach, it becomes a little bit easier
For
to move
sure.
forward.
And Renuma, I know that we're all aware of what has happened here in the US, but we might not be aware of what's going on in your other country out there in Bangladesh. So talk about how that has also shaped your view on this idea of agreeing to disagree, because there's some turmoil going on over there as well.
Yeah, we have like recently we ousted a regime that was oppressing people's voice. So we were not able to speak or have our own voice. So finally, I think the students and the people of Bangladesh, they had enough, and there was a mass uprising. A lot of tragedy happened with a lot of lives lost. But now what we thought that it would be all nice once we get rid of the oppressive regime, it will be all happy. We will be all working together, everything will work out nice, and it's a new Bangladesh 2.0. But sadly, it's not the reality. So now there are so many different groups, the students demand, the workers, the professionals, and they are not listening to each other. So that's a very big problem, and everybody thinks that what they're saying is right. And I think that is where we need to have a strong leader. We do have a strong leader who is the Nobel laureate in peace, Professor Yunus. But because he's mild in nature, so probably he's not being heard properly. But that is why I think there should be dialogue. We have not yet brought all the parties together under one roof to have the dialogue. Professor Yunus is talking with each group separately, but not together. And that is why I think a lot of ideas are being lost in translation. So probably one of the way we can reduce these kind of disagreement is actually coming up with offering solution after understanding each party's point of view and respecting, like, I hear you, instead of criticizing, you are totally wrong, we don't like your thoughts. And that is what's happening. Everybody is like disrespecting each other, not listening to each other, and criticizing. So I think once we can stop criticizing and come up with solutions, that's when respectfully we can disagree and move somewhere.
Most certainly. And so I think the two things that you've shared so far, the value of respect, that for Coach is a core value, but also the empathy and seeking first to understand rather than to be understood. And I want to comment on that too with my point, and that is the value of listening, a lost art here in our society in the 21st century because everybody has a voice. And I think it's a positive that everybody has a voice, but it can also backfire a little bit. We all have the power via social media or through all the other influences that we have to have a voice. We all have a vote. We all have the right to have an opinion and to share that opinion, which is great. The problem is oftentimes we get too excited to share that opinion and too strong-willed to share that opinion that we don't realize the other rights that others have around us to share theirs, and
Right.
that it's actually valuable to listen to theirs to maybe craft our own or adjust our own, or at least just respectfully listen. So the role of listening needs to be real. It's something that we can practice. It's
Right.
something that we can actually go into a conversation knowing that we have a strong disagreement. Maybe, for example, it's a political disagreement that you have. You're from the opposite party of somebody that you know, and you know you're going into Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow, say, knowing that this is going to come up. It's inevitable. It's an election year. It just happened. It's the elephant in the room. How do you prepare yourself to go into that environment with a listening mindset first? And it's amazing how
Mm.
tensions can be de-escalated when you aren't talking over someone. Nobody's talking over each other. You're just simply listening and acknowledging someone's viewpoint. Sometimes that's all people want from you is
Right.
to be acknowledged, not necessarily to change your mind. And sometimes maybe they want to change your mind, and those are the types of people that maybe you want to spend less time with or avoid if
Right.
possible. But sometimes people just want to have their opinion or voice validated or acknowledged, even if they know
Right.
that you disagree. So the role of listening, think of that as we get towards the holiday season and how divided we still are as a country and as a world. So we have the core value of respect, empathy, seeking first to understand, and the importance of listening. And I will note, just a side note too, that we've had a lot of guests here on the Limitless Leadership Lounge and a ton of great episodes. In fact, over 100 episodes that you can go listen to with guests that are great. And we recommend, all of them certainly. And one thing that I believe every single guest has said in one way or another, even though they all have very different views of the world and how to achieve success, but the one common denominator is how important it is to be a good listener. And I
True.
just think that's fascinating. That's one of the things that I've learned from hosting this podcast. Coach Renuma, any final thoughts on agreeing to
Yeah, I
disagree?
actually have the famous call to action CTA. I have three quick points I want to share. One is that respect starts with how you address people. It's funny because I'm on this one guy's email list, and he's done extremely well, but I should cancel him, but I don't even read his email because you know what he starts with? Hey Johnson. And to me, that's disrespectful. And now
Mm.
I know he's making it as a joke, but for me, the respect is I like to be
Mm.
called, if I know you, Jim, or coach is highly respectful, or, if it's someone that, a student, Mr. Johnson, those types of things. So I think how we address people, that would be something to think about. Number two is that when we talk about respect, how about when you're in conversations, are you talking negative behind people's backs that aren't in the room? We've probably all done it. I know I have, but it's something I've become much more cognizant, and I know I've gotten better. I'm certainly not perfect, but it's a challenge for us all to not talk negative about somebody that's not in the room. And then the third thing, we talk about leadership and shining the light on others. How about taking the perspective when you see someone that did something, got something well done to them? Congratulate them, be happy for them instead of being jealous or upset because somebody got that. Because the best leaders to me are the servant leaders, and they think about how can I
Mm.
serve and shine the light on others.
Yeah, and I want to end with one issue. Like we do not need to shy away from disagreement because sometimes a constructive disagreement opens our mind
Mhm.
and makes us conscious about our surrounding, give us information which we didn't knew before. So that's why I never, many of my friends always complain, like, whenever there is some argument, you jump into it. Why do you do that? And I enjoy debating, so that is what I enjoy. and I am always curious and want to learn more. Why are they thinking that way? What are the reason they're thinking that way? And it helps me to understand the person, the situation, and that is why not being judgmental, just trying to understand the point of view. So I would request everybody to have this skill to disagree respectfully, because then you open your mind, innovative thinking can happen, new ideas can even crop up from there. So it's always good.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's your call to action, coach, and what you said, Renuma, too, very important because this is now your turn. This is a two-way dialogue. It's not just the three of us sharing information, but we would love to hear from you too, whether it's ideas on agreeing to disagree, maybe it's a specific circumstance that you can tell a story to us. We'd love to hear from you. Limitlessleadershippodcast@gmail.com. Or, you know what you can do? You can reach out to one of us individually on LinkedIn or any of the other platforms where you can find us. We're very accessible, and share your story with us. And maybe in the future, we'll bring that up on a future episode here of the Limitless Leadership Lounge. We would love to feature you. And speaking of featuring you, if you want to leave us a review too, that would help us immensely, and it would also provide us with feedback for how we can improve here on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. So you can do that on your favorite podcast player. In the meantime, we'll be back. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll be back next week. We'll talk about some sales and leadership with a very special guest that we're going to bring on next week here, and that'll be right here on the Limitless Leadership Lounge.